Welcome to More Than a Lawyer with your host, attorney Christy Crow. This is a podcast that highlights the amazing acts of service that lawyers perform all over the country. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, www.jinxcrow.com. Now here's the host of More Than a Lawyer, Christy Crow.
Welcome back to More Than a Lawyer. We're so glad to have you here with us today. And more importantly, we're glad to have our guest, Jennifer Mason, here with us today. Welcome to More Than a Lawyer, Jennifer. Thanks for being here, even if it's obviously on the road today.
Indeed. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Jennifer, we're going to talk a lot about what you do outside the courtroom. But before we do that, can you let our audience know a little bit about your practice and what you do when you're at work?
Sure. So I'm a commercial litigator. I've been litigating for over 31 years. Seems like a terribly long time, but I love, representing the clients I have who are wonderful. And I love trying cases most of all.
That's great. Well, and you're with Dinsmore there in West Virginia?
I am.
And how long have you been with them?
So I've been with Dinsmore for almost 8 years. It'll be 8 years in May. And I originally started my practice in West Virginia and then moved to Pittsburgh for about 25 years. And but I grew up in southern West Virginia in the mountains. And so my husband and I decided to move back there and, plan to retire there. So, we just made a little bit of an early start of it.
Good for you. Well, it's always good to get back home and be where you're comfortable, and you've landed with a great firm there in West Virginia. So we've talked enough about what you do inside the courtroom. Tell us, and I think this probably goes with your passion for your clients. Tell us one of your passions. You said it's helping grow hometown businesses. Give us a little description of that and how you do that and why you do that.
Yeah, when I got back to West Virginia, one of my passions became trying to help, local businesses thrive. And so I returned in 2018 and I started by creating a Facebook page. And essentially what I do, it's called Greenbrier County Business. And what I do is when I see advertisements from local businesses, I put them on there. And I do it because we have a large hotel called the Greenbrier in Greenbrier County. And a lot of people come there, but they don't know what goes on in Greenbrier County. And so to help have a consolidated site where people could see what's going on, festivals or specials at a restaurant or, a new business opening up, I wanted to try to bring it all together because, of course, we thrive together if the businesses survive, the community survives. And so I just wanted to kind of facilitate that.
I love that. We thrive together. And that's one thing when I was state bar president a few years ago, my theme was better together. And so I firmly believe that if we help each other, a rising boat, a rising tide raises all boats. I lost the quote there for a minute. We thrive together is a much better way to put it because it's just so amazing what you can do. Everyone's heard of the Greenbrier, of course, but if you encourage people to find other businesses in a community when they go to a famous landmark hotel like that, that's a great way to help local businesses thrive. So that's great. Another thing that you did during COVID was you started a program to help some restaurants stay in business. Tell us about that and how you did that and why you did that.
So it kind of started from my idea in relation to helping other businesses. But when they came on the TV in March and said, everybody has to close down, I thought to myself, how? These people who work in the restaurants, what are they going to do? They've got families to feed. The people that own those businesses, what are they going to do? And so I started thinking to myself, how can we help them? And at the same time, they were telling people who were, not immune or people that were at risk that they had to stay at home. And this included a lot of elderly people and what have you. And, the question was, if you can't go grocery shopping and feed yourself, how are you going to survive? And I thought to myself, okay, well, if I can somehow keep the restaurants open and use them to feed the people that need food, then maybe I can, marry those two needs, and we can all thrive together. So I started the program. The restaurants were permitted to, as long as they only had essentially the cook there and someone to help them put the things in to-go baskets, they were permitted to stay open. And so, we kept 3 or 4 people from the restaurant in business. We paid them. We actually got donations from the community, and really in huge ways. I couldn't believe the amount of help we got, but we paid them essentially the average cost of a meal plus some, so that not only did they meet their expenses, but they also could pay their employees. And so, we didn't cut the cost or anything. We actually paid them the regular fees. And so at the same time we were, getting the food to feed the people who needed it, we also kept the restaurants in business. And then when we delivered the food, we did it in a way that there was no contact with the individuals. So other than they could see each other. So they had to keep at least 10 feet away from the person to whom they were delivering. But what they would do is they would take this pre-packaged bag that had the meal in it. They would put it by the front door, knock on the door, and then they had to back away. And so they would back away 10 feet, and then they could talk to the individual and communicate, which many of them needed at that time because they were so isolated. But we were able to feed them, keep them from being isolated, and have some communication. And in fact, some of the people who we served, some of them were disabled individuals, some of them were veterans. And what was amazing is some of them said they hadn't felt so cared for or part of the community in a very long time. And so not only did we help the restaurants thrive, but we helped, those individuals thrive. And it was really, it was wonderful to see. We had so many wonderful comments, and the community came together. The School of Osteopathic Medicine that is in my town, they helped us set up a phone bank because I was originally taking all the phone calls.
Oh my gosh.
700 people on our list. And so in the end, they offered to help because they had a phone system and they could take those messages for me, as the list continued to grow and what have you. And so they helped us tremendously. And I mean, it just went on and on. There were so many, businesses and organizations that helped. It was wonderful to see.
My gosh, Jennifer, that is great. I cannot believe you came up with that idea and then implemented it in such a big way. That is awesome. And I'm sure they probably continued to support those restaurants even after they were able to go out again. Either
absolutely.
Through Uber Eats or actually going to the restaurants.
Well, it actually exposed a bunch of people who hadn't been to some of those restaurants to new places. And so they really have thrived. A couple of them were able, one over in the western end of Greenbrier County was able to move from one building to a larger building with nicer facilities. And, all because of the amount of business that they were getting, because the folks they were serving really loved the meals. And so it really helped in many ways.
And I know you did that as part of the Greenbrier Valley Health Alliance. Tell us what that is and how that organization came into being and what else it does.
Sure. So the Greenbrier County Health Alliance, I actually was asked to join it after the program because so much of the program was right along with their core values. But they are they were created by the Center for Rural and Community Health, and that is part of the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine. And so what they have done is try to create an organization that helps to find funding for and resources for community organizations that serve others. So it's kind of a conduit. And so, we find grants and then we give away, for example, mini grants to organizations that are trying to help people with, food insecurity or, individuals on the food banks, or there's just so many different ones. But any organization that is trying to help the health of the community, whether that be mental health, physical health, food insecurity, or what have you, can apply to seek, for example, the what are called the CAP grants. And so that's one way that it works. There are many different projects. Like, we put together a resource folder that essentially has all of the organizations in the Greenbrier Valley that do this type of work, so that everybody knows what resources are available. And if someone comes to one person and that person has more needs than they can fulfill, they're able to actually look at that resource book and see who else in the community might be able to help them. So put together that kind of resource book. There are all kinds of things the organization does, but those are two of the big ones.
That is a very cool sounding organization. And I know West Virginia, like Alabama and many southern states, has a lot of health related issues in their communities. And so to have those resources available for the community and have that outreach is truly remarkable. And I'm excited that you're part of that. And I think as part of that too, you also donate and deliver fresh produce.
Yes. So one of the things that during COVID, it's been recognized by many people for a while, but food insecurity can cause health issues. So one of the concerns was with when COVID, had hit so hard, was that individuals who were at risk were going to be further at risk, because now their food insecurity, was going to raise. And
right.
So we tried to.
The food banks. The food banks weren't working. There was just no food.
There wasn't, and like many older people were staffing the food banks, and they didn't want to do that because of the risk to themselves. So the question was, how can you make sure that people are getting the proper nutrition, the fruits and vegetables and protein and what have you, that are going to help them stay healthy. And so what we did was, as soon as we did about 2 months of the feeding seniors, that is taking meals 3 times a week to people. And then, the government stepped in with all kinds of programs. We kind of filled the need for that between, March, when it just began, and a couple months later when, government resources started catching up. And then we said, okay, well, we still need to help. And so we started working with the food banks to deliver fresh produce. So we kind of continued to look for needs. And what happened was, they were telling us the local farmers now, their crops were starting to come in, because now we're like, May, June, what have you. And the farmers have fresh produce, but the restaurants aren't open. Where are they going to sell all that food? So we decided to purchase the food from them. It was, fresh produce, and then give it to the food banks. And the food banks weren't working. So what we did was get the list of people who were on the food banks and then go deliver the fresh produce to them. So we helped the farmers stay in business. At the same time, we were delivering fresh produce to people who were food insecure to make sure they could stay healthy.
I've read and heard multiple articles about how that disconnect is one of the biggest problems with food insecurity in the United States, because we have a lot of food, we have a lot of farms, and we have hungry people, but getting the food that we have to the people that need it is where the disconnect is. So how did y'all get the resources to solve that problem?
So we had a lot of people helping us raise funds. And then we worked with, there was an organization in our community along with the Mountaineer Food Bank. And so, we just put resources together, because at that time, most organizations were really willing to work together to try to bridge those gaps. And so we said, okay, we're willing to deliver this food if, we can purchase the food from you. And so they allowed us to purchase from their local resources and then to deliver that food. It was really an unprecedented marriage, because, it hadn't worked that way before. But we enabled the food to continue to be delivered when there weren't other places that were doing it. Like, as you said, the food banks were closed because they didn't want to have, a whole bunch of people come into one area. So we had to figure out. And we already had the delivery services set up because of feeding seniors. So we already had the volunteers. We already had the mechanisms. I just worked with the food banks to, there were several of them, and I worked with them to get the names of people and their addresses, and then use that information to push it forward. So it was really an unprecedented marriage, but it worked really well.
It sounds like it. And it sounds like you're very good at bringing resources together to meet needs that you see in your community. What do you think it is about your legal education and your background that makes you thrive and succeed in bringing those resources together?
I'm fairly, adept at communication, and I'm not afraid to talk. And I think my trial experiences taught me a lot of those lessons. And so, the ability to communicate and meet people, but more importantly, it is relationship building. And I think that in my job, I've certainly learned that relationships are important and that you can't do it alone. And so, trying to go out and communicate with people and make sure they understand the need, but also building those relationships, was very helpful.
And was this something, it sounds like everything you do would be a full-time job. How do you make time for all of your volunteer commitments and practicing law and trying cases?
It was an interesting time. I would work in the morning, and then in the afternoon and in the evening, I would, run these programs. It was a time when, I said to my law firm, I said, I feel like I'm not doing a lot because, the courts shut down. And so we weren't trying cases, and I wanted to help. And so I said, I feel I don't want to just sit here at home and do nothing. I need to help somebody. I need to go out and make use of the talents that I've got to try to make sure that we protect our community and protect our citizens and, get out there and do stuff. So I tried to, at first I had thought about, going out and trying to do, wills or what have you for people that needed them, but that's not my specialty. And my firm said, Jen, we love you, but that's not really what you do best. And I said, okay, well, let me figure something else out. And that's when I actually did some praying, and I said, God, what would you have me do? I really felt led to this program to do it and to help people.
Well, and just so the listeners will know, this is not a one and done thing where you just volunteered during COVID when you had a little extra time. You're still doing a lot of volunteer work that's related to both those programs and also some debate skills that you do. Tell us about that.
Yes. So when I first started practicing, I represented a bunch of kids who were abused and neglected, probably more than 1,000 in the 10 years that I did it. It was a lot of kids. And so then for a period of time, the next 15 years or so, I did not do that work. But when I came back to, where I grew up, there is a group home in our town. And I knew from my experience representing those kids that many of them feel like they are subject to the system. They don't really understand it. They don't know the rules. They don't understand the whole thing. And so what I decided to do was to start a debate club at that group home and to teach the kids how to debate, hoping that maybe some of them might someday want to be a lawyer or what have you. But I started a debate club, and part of the debate was to teach them the rules of abuse and neglect law that they were subject to, because that way they could feel like they actually understood what was happening, in their lives. And so, that's what we did. And I basically go over one day a week and we do the debate club and teach them, what the rules of a debate are. But then give them scenarios that they can use to practice their skills. So it's been a lot of fun working with them. They're amazing, amazing kids and a lot of fun to work with. But that's how it all started.
That's awesome. Well, we could probably talk about more things you do, like teaching at the law school and chairing the Women's Law Committee at the West Virginia State Bar. And all of that sounds like, again, another full-time job. Why do you think it's important to make time for these activities like teaching debate and working with various health-related organizations and teaching at the law school?
To me, community is everything. And each person in our community is as valuable as the next. And raising people up just makes us all raise up together. So to me, it's about community. And it's also about family, because at the same time I was doing it, my children, I have 2 sons, were helping me with those programs. They were bagging up the food to take to the food bank. They were delivering the food. They were going to when we had about 70 different families on the food banks that we were delivering to. And sometimes we didn't have enough to put in all the bags. So I made them go back to the store and purchase additional stuff. And they would run to the store for me. But it was showing them what community is about, what it means. And to me and their friends ended up helping us. They would come over and they would be the ones who helped me bag groceries. Or, we also did a program where we went to shop for groceries for people, because many of those seniors still couldn't go to the grocery stores. So we actually got their food list and we would go to the grocery store and shop for them. And so there were so many things that the kids helped with that, to me, it's kind of teaching what community is about, what's important, and helping them learn how to do those skills. And also, raising the community up together. So that's why I think it's so important. I mean, being an example, one, to my kids, but also raising up others.
That's awesome, Jennifer. Well, we could talk all day because you have a lot of other interesting things we could talk about that you do. But wrapping up, this being the More Than a Lawyer podcast, tell us what being more than a lawyer means to you.
I think it's important to use the talents that we've been given to do as much as we can with them. And while trying cases is absolutely what I love to do for my job, my talents, I hope to use in a way that I can benefit other people. I mean, I truly believe that's what, God gave me certain gifts. And I want to use them in a way that are pleasing to him and that will help me to raise up the community that I'm in. And to me, it's a responsibility. It's more than just, I enjoy helping. I really believe that I was put in the position I am to help others. My mom said it best. She's unfortunately no longer with us, but to whom much is given, much is also required. And that's kind of the way I live my life.
Well, now we know why you had to join us from your car, because you are always on the go. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking time to talk with us today and for joining us on More Than a Lawyer. And we look forward to seeing what the future has in store for you in Greenbrier, West Virginia.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
You've been tuning into More Than a Lawyer with your host, attorney Christy Crow. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, www.jinxcrow.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.